Actually, there is something I'd like to share, and it's along a different line than what I shared previously, and it has to do with the value of working together with other people. What I've discovered over the years is that no one is really ever a success on their own, and I mean on your own with God. Okay, this things may get started, but you're never going to realize your fullest potential on your own. And this is a truth that has been driven home to me over and over throughout the years. And biblically, there's a story that jumped to mind when Paul mentioned that, and it has to do with something that took place a long time ago in an area in the desert called En-Gedi. And you know the story about David and King Saul. King Saul, was the first king of Israel, and he had a sense of being entitled to that position and to that power and to that title. I mean, that's the whole issue of being entitled. And so when David, whom he originally had brought into his court, killed Goliath and began to rise up, he in the end felt threatened, and he felt that David was a threat to his rulership, was a threat to his dynasty, was a threat to his son. And so every time he looked at David, instead of seeing this anointed co-worker, he saw danger. And so he eventually decided that he would eliminate David, and you know how David was warned and fled, and Saul chased after him. And then there's a story about when they ended up in the desert. David fled down south into the Arava, and he took refuge in what they call the fortress of En-Gedi. Okay, and there was they could come and go through the wadis, and there was water, so they could also survive in a very arid climate. And so Saul brought the army of Israel, chased David down there, found out that he was in that area, chased him down there with a large army, and as he was chasing after David, he went into a cave to relieve himself. But David and his men were hiding in the back of the cave, and so while Saul was in there, David's men are whispering to him, this is the day you've been waiting for. Okay, here's your enemy. Okay, you could end it right here and now. Okay, and as soon as Saul is dead, his dynasty is finished, and you'll be free. Not only that, you'll be king. So David sneaks forward and cuts off the edge of his robe, and then afterwards Saul leaves the cave, but David's conscience really makes him feel bad. So he goes out and he calls out to Saul. So you get the picture of this deep, deep ravine in the desert. David's on one side of the ravine, Saul and his army on the other. David calls out to him and said, "Look, Saul, the people are lying to you about me. I don't intend you harm. Okay, I'm not a threat to you. You see, I was in the cave when you were there and could have taken your life, and others were urging me to do that, but I didn't do it. Because I won't put my hand out against someone that God himself has chosen. And so see and know that I'm not your enemy." And it says that Saul, when he realized that David was telling him the truth and what had happened, he broke down and wept and said, "David, you're right. You're more righteous than I, and surely I know that you will be king of Israel. Make me a promise that when you become king of Israel, you won't wipe out all of my relatives, okay, as kings do. Okay, you won't cut off my line in revenge." And David promised, and they went on their way. Okay, but Saul never changed his mind about chasing after David, and continued to try to find him and execute him. And so the thought occurred to me in that story, what would it have been like if on that day Saul had really had a change of heart and had said something like, "David, you're right, this is foolishness. We're wasting the resources of our nation. Okay, we're wasting our time, we're wasting our lives. Okay, here's what I propose to you. Let's go back to Jerusalem and let's do this together." Okay, I don't know. We'll work out whatever title we need. Okay, but let's work on ruling God's kingdom together. and we'll figure out how this works. Come back to Jerusalem with me. Now, had that happened, you have to, and you have to use your imagination. And, I think it was C.S. Lewis that said, God never tells you what if, okay? But you have to kind of think in this event, what if he'd actually had that change of heart? Let's work together. Let's extend the kingdom together. I think that sometime later, when Saul and Jonathan were fighting for their lives against the Philistines on Mount Gilboa in the north of Israel, and we know how that battle ended with their deaths and their bodies being abused, okay? What would it have been like if David and his 500 mighty men had been on the scene? Do you think they could have turned that battle around? David was the most gifted and anointed warrior that Israel ever produced. And what about years later when David finally did become king, and the spring comes, and it's time for the kings to go out and make war and beat back the enemies and take the territory and do all the things that kings did in those days, okay? What if he'd had old King Saul there, urging him, saying, David, look, it's springtime. It's time for you to go out and make war. You're the most gifted warrior our nation has ever produced. Okay, don't worry about Jerusalem. I'll take care of it. I'll watch your back, okay? I'll take care of Jerusalem. You go out and fight and do what you do best. Oh, and by the way, people have told me there's this woman who's bathing, under your window. You need to go tell someone to tell her to cut it out. I mean, imagine what God's kingdom could have been like if these two men had somehow laid aside their differences and decided that they would work together. And I want to leave that thought with you, that each one of us, it has both Saul and David in us. And we have people around us that can be tremendous allies or incredible threats. And I believe that the Lord is speaking prophetically to some people about making a change of heart and looking at the people around you in a different light. And asking yourself, what if? What if we did this together? Because I believe this is why when Jesus arrives on the scene and is proclaiming the kingdom of God, the most important, non-reducible element of the kingdom, according to Jesus, is love. He says, you love God with all of your heart and all of your soul and all of your strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you can do those two things, you've got it all. Oh, and a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another the way I love you. Greater love has no man than this. He laid down his life for his friends. I mean, this is not just so that we'll all feel good about each other. It's practical advice for overcoming the enemy and extending the kingdom of God. So I would like to just leave that with you, that in going forward, in order to achieve what we need to achieve, not one of us, even though we may receive the vision sovereignly from God, not one of us will ever achieve it alone. Okay, God will put people in your life, and together you're always going to be so much greater than you would ever be on your own. Bless you.